you said, and I quote, "One of the things we'd like the Israelis to do is switch the water back on." Now, that says that they turned it off. It says that you recognise they have the power to turn it on. Therefore, isn't turning water off and having the ability to turn it back on but choosing not to, isn't that a breach of international humanitarian law?
It's just something they ought to do, in my view.
No, of course they should do it. Every human being would say you don't cut people's water supply off. But I'm asking you, in your position as Foreign Secretary, around the point of international humanitarian law, if Israel have the power to turn the water back on that they turned off, surely that is a flagrant breach of international humanitarian law.
Well, I'm not a lawyer. My view is they ought to switch it on because the north of Gaza, the conflict is now effectively over there, and so getting more water and power into northern Gaza would be a very good thing to do. You don't have to be a lawyer to make a judgment about that, you just have to be a human being.
We are facing a situation of dreadful suffering in Gaza. There can be no doubt about that. I spoke some weeks ago about the danger of this tipping into famine and the danger of illness tipping into disease, and we are now at that point. People are dying of hunger, people are dying of otherwise preventable diseases. And the situation is very bad because we've been pushing for this aid to get in. We've had a whole set of things we've asked the Israelis to do, but I have to report to your Lordship's House that the amount of aid that got in February was about half what got in January. So patience needs to run very thin, and a whole series of warnings need to be given, starting, I hope, with the meeting I have with Minister Gantz when he visits the UK tomorrow. We've set out very clearly a set of 5 asks which need to be put in place. The humanitarian pause, the capacity inside Gaza that many noble lords have spoken about, the increased access through both land and maritime routes, including Ashdod port, which the noble Lord Collins mentioned, and of course expanding the type of humanitarian assistance that gets in. Too many items are sent away because they're supposedly dual-use goods, and some of these things are things that are absolutely necessary for medical and other procedures. And we also need to see a resumption of electricity, water to North and South Gaza. Let me say again at this dispatch box, Israel is the occupying power. It is responsible. And that has consequences, including in how we look at whether Israel is compliant with international humanitarian law. So I think that is the most important thing on the issue of Gaza. Turning to the political process and how, as many noble lords said, how do we try and turn this moment of such disaster into a moment of opportunity? Baroness Northover, the noble Lord Desai, the Bishop of Leeds, Lord Lee, all asked, are we committed to finding an answer? Do we see this as an opportunity? And my answer to that is yes, the situation is terrible, but if we can turn a pause for this hostage deal into a sustainable ceasefire and build momentum so we don't go back to fighting, there is a chance, because I think, as the noble Lord Lee said, there's some exhaustion on both sides. There may be a chance to get to a more of a political solution. I know a number of noble lords, including Lord Hannay, said, are we rather torturing ourselves with this debate between pause and ceasefire? The reason I think this is the right way is by saying a pause, which should happen now. I want it to happen tonight, tomorrow, to stop this killing, is to have a pause, and then you put in place the conditions that make a ceasefire more likely to be permanent. I've been clear, we need an immediate humanitarian pause to increase aid into Gaza and get the hostages out. Israel must remove restrictions on aid and restore electricity, water and telecommunications.
And what Iran did was a very, very dangerous act in an already dangerous world. And your report was completely right. But when we think about the 301 weapons that were fired at Israel, they weren't all drones. There were 110 ballistic missiles. There were 43 cruise missiles. This was a very significant attack. But fortunately, it was a failure because of the brave action of Israeli defences and what the Americans did and our limited role.
It's right to be here in Israel today to show solidarity after that appalling attack by Iran. We made clear our views yesterday about what should happen next, but we also said Israel is an independent sovereign country and gets to make these choices. We continue to hope that as they do so in a way that is smart as well as tough.
This week I'm in Israel, the occupied Palestinian territories and Italy. The situation on the ground is incredibly tense. Along with my G7 partners, I condemned Iran's dangerous attack on Israel. We must remain focused on de-escalation. Only by achieving an immediate pause in Gaza, getting aid in and getting hostages out, can we make progress towards that sustainable ceasefire we so badly need. I will continue to work with partners to build a more secure and more stable Middle East.
אני בא עכשיו מפגישות עם שרי החוץ של בריטניה וגרמניה. אמש שוחחתי עם ראש ממשלת בריטניה רישי סונק. בקרוב אני גם משוחח עם מנהיגים נוספים. אני מודה לידידינו על תמיכתם בהגנת ישראל, ואני אומר את זה גם תמיכה במילים וגם תמיכה במעשים. יש להם גם כל מיני הצעות ועצות, אני מעריך את זה, אבל אני רוצה להבהיר שאת ההחלטות שלנו אנחנו נקבל בעצמנו.